open source and free game engine capable of making 2D and 3D games. And unlike Unreal, it's very lightweight and easy to run. Because Godot is relatively newer, there haven't been a lot of commercial games made with it yet, but its library is growing and there are a ton of cool games in production. So far, Godot is mostly known for making 2D games, but I want to try out some of its 3D capabilities. So I'm going to make a 2.5D game this time around. Like last time, I started by just trying to get the basic mechanics working, and it wasn't too hard to figure them out. Godot uses its own scripting language called GDScript, which is very similar to Python. And after watching just a couple short tutorials, I was able to get the catcher moving left and right. Then I found this nice asset in the Godot asset library called Level Block. It lets you quickly build levels by placing textures on the inside faces of cubes that you can quickly stack together. And now we have the floor and back wall. Then I needed to create some 3D models for the game. I used this cool open source tool called Magica Voxel. It's an easy to learn program that lets you make voxel models, which are basically 3D models made up of a bunch of small cubes. And I thought this pixelated look would fit well with the game. The model I used for the player came with the program, but I did try my hand at making a gold coin to use as our falling object, and I modeled some columns for the background. Then conveniently, someone in the Godot community made a tool to import Magica Voxel files directly into Godot, so that saved me a bit of time. Then I scripted the coins to spawn and the score to update, and had another nice little version of the game running. Overall, I'd have to say my experience using Godot was awesome. It's easy to use coming from Unity, and there's a great community of people supporting it. If you want a game engine that's completely open source, easy to run, and quite versatile, Godot's the way to go. Now to try out Game Maker. I was looking forward to trying Game Maker because I've always heard a lot about it and it's made some incredible titles. Though there may be some exceptions, Game Maker is mostly a 2D game engine. To me, that's really exciting because I love the charm and look of 2D games.
The game literally knows that I was gonna get it because
this time around.
Because I mastered the part I was struggling on. So they throw some random
cool jungle tile
thing at me.
It was really fun to build the level, and it's satisfying to see it come together like a little puzzle. Game Maker has a useful layer system, so you can place tiles in the foreground and background and anywhere in between. I also really like the layout of Game Maker's interface, like everything feels very accessible and you don't have to dig too deep to find things. Next, I found this animated pixel art Viking on the asset store to use as our player. It was really simple to set up his animations and get a movement script on him. Then I worked on getting these jewels to spawn and fall from the sky for the player to catch. Game Maker uses its own scripting language called GML code, which is kind of like JavaScript. For some reason, the gems kept spawning every frame, but it ended up being a pretty simple fix. Then I added the same logic as in the previous versions of the game for collecting the gems and updating the score. I did add one extra mechanic to this version of the game. 2 fish jump up from the water that you have to dodge, or your score will be reset back to 0. All said and done, I have to say that working in Game Maker was a very pleasant experience. Something about it is just really fun and easy to use. If you're looking for an extremely capable and polished 2D game engine, then Game Maker's the perfect tool. The next game engine is Construct 3. It's the first no-code engine I've tried. That's right, you don't have to know how to program to use it. I couldn't find a definitive list of commercial games made with Construct, but these are a few of them along with some other cool projects still in development. The editor itself looks and works a lot like any other game engine, except it's an online editor that runs in the browser. The way this engine works is you still have your game objects, such as this blue circle I'm using as the player, and this rectangle I'm using as the ground. But instead of coding scripts, you add these things called behaviors to your game objects to give them functionality. So I'm adding a movement behavior to the blue circle and a behavior called solid to the red rectangle so the player won't fall through it. Then just like that, the player can move and jump on the platform. Then I went on itch.io and found some free pixel art sprites to use instead of our basic shapes. With those, I quickly designed a tiny pirate theme level. And now our pirate player is able to run and jump around in the level. Then I added chests that will fall from the sky for our player to catch. That was easy to do as well. I just added a physics behavior to the sprite. Next, we need to handle the player catching the chests and updating the score. Instead of writing code for this, Construct uses events. All I had to do was add in a collision event and say I want the score to increase when the collision event between the player and chest happens, and an event to reset the score when a chest hits the ground. And by using behaviors and events in this way, I quickly finished our little catch game. Overall, I'd say my experience using Construct 3 was great. It's really cool to be able to quickly get a game up and running without worrying about how to code it. I can definitely see myself using it to make smaller projects and prototypes in the future. Now for another no-code 2D game engine called GDevelop. I actually couldn't find any well-known commercial games made with GDevelop because I think it's still an emerging engine, but their website has an impressive impressive showcase of projects, and there's a growing community of developers
It's a
excited about the
no-code
engine.
game.
On to making our game. GDevelop has a built-in pixel editor called Pascal, but I decided to use some art from their free asset library. The process for making the game in GDevelop was very similar to Construct. I was able to quickly get our player moving on a platform by adding behaviors to them. Then I made crates fall from the sky by putting a physics behavior on them.
That
In this
is
version of
so
the game,
dumb!
I added traveling missiles that the player has to dodge. And just like with Construct, there's an event system to handle what happens if the player catches a falling crate or gets hit by a missile and the other game mechanics. Then I filled out the level by adding a background with trees and clouds and a score up top. And just like that, we have another finished version of the game. All in all, I'd say GDevelop is an awesome engine for anyone wanting to try 2D game development for the first time. I can't wait to use it more in the future and see what kind of finished games come out of the community. The next game engine for experiment is RPG Maker NZ. I was honestly excited to try it out because the old Super Nintendo JRPGs are my childhood. RPG Maker itself has been around forever, and I remember playing the first version of it back in the day thinking I was going to make the next big Final Fantasy. RPG Maker is another no-code engine, and what's cool about it is that it has everything you need to make a game built into it. When you start off a project, it already has a title screen made and your party of 4 characters set up. It actually took me a bit to figure out how to go into the project files and delete the other 3 players because I didn't need them. The movement of the player is already set up, so there's nothing to do there. Then I tried to make a treasure chest fall, or in this case slide down from the top of the screen. RPG Maker has its own event system, but it works a bit differently than Construct and GDevelop. I had to look up a bunch of stuff, but eventually I managed to get the chest moving across the screen and the player able to collect it. Then I used some built-in tile sets to make the level. This was probably my favorite part of making the game.
What am I doing different?
Next, I used the event system to spawn more chests for the player to collect. There wasn't an easy way to set up the score at the top, so I made an event that triggers this pig to tell you your score when the round is over. Cool. And there we have our functional little game loop. Overall, my impression of RPG Maker is that it's a lot of fun to play around with, and it has a ton of charm, but it was the most inflexible of all the game engines I tried. It seems best suited for making a traditional top-down RPG, a visual novel, or a story-rich game. But if you want to make something outside of that, you might consider looking at another engine. Last but not least is a game engine called Scratch, made by MIT as an educational tool, but has become so much more. If you go to the website, there are tons of really cool small games and projects made with Scratch. Now let's get to making our game. Scratch is similar to the other engines in many ways. First, we make our game objects. I used an image of the seafloor that comes with Scratch as our background. Then I browsed the Scratch library and found an image of a bowl of cheese puffs to use as our character and a fortune cookie as the object that will fall. Then the way you give your in-game objects behaviors is a little different than the other engines. What you do is drag these colored blocks of code